In a small village nestled between the lush, green hills of West Africa lived a family whose life seemed as ordinary as the rising sun. The family's story begins with a father named Kwame, a hard-working man whose hands had weathered many years of labor under the scorching sun. His wife, Amma, had passed away several years ago, leaving him to raise their two children, Kofi and Akua, alone. Life had not been easy, but Kwame had managed. His children were his pride and joy, and together they formed a small but tight-knit family. That was until Efua came into their lives. Efua, the new stepmother, appeared suddenly one bright afternoon, like the monsoon rains that sweep across the savannah, unpredictable yet inevitable. At first, her presence was accepted with quiet hesitation. Kofi and Akua, still mourning their mother's absence, viewed Efua as just another woman trying to take their mother's place. She was different, soft-spoken, with an air of mystery around her. Her smile was warm, but her eyes seemed to carry a weight that neither child could understand. Efua did what all stepmothers do. She cooked, cleaned, and tried to offer guidance, but she was never quite able to bridge the gap of mistrust. The children, while respectful, kept her at arm's length. She became another authority figure to follow, another voice of discipline, but not one they'd ever fully embrace. The father, Kwame, however, was taken by Efua's calmness and beauty. She had transformed his home from one of mourning into one of quiet hope. He often spoke of her with admiration, his heart swelling with the idea of a new family, a new beginning. Yet something about Efua unsettled his children, especially Akua, the older of the two. Akua could not shake the feeling that Efua's quiet demeanor hid something much darker. She noticed how Efua's face would sometimes cloud over, as if remembering something painful, then quickly mask it with a soft smile. Akua didn't know what it was, but she felt it deep in her bones. Efua wasn't the woman she appeared to be. And so, the stage was set. A family trying to heal from loss, and a stepmother who seemed to hold secrets in the depths of her eyes. But what was the secret? No one could say. Not yet. The mystery lingered, much like the way the afternoon sun lingers over the savannah before the stars come out to reveal their full glory. Efua was not what anyone expected. From the moment she entered the small, mud-brick house, there was an air of quietness that followed her like a shadow. She did not raise her voice, nor did she demand attention. In fact, she rarely spoke unless spoken to. But there was something in her calm demeanor that drew Kwame closer each day. To him, she was the perfect woman, the balm for wounds that had long bled. She cleaned the house with care, cooked with the same devotion, and even taught the children how to respect their elders, as was their custom. Yet, despite her seemingly gentle nature, something about her made the air feel heavier, as if each day was another layer of a mystery that was yet to be uncovered. Kwame admired her from the moment she arrived, her elegance shining through even in the simplest tasks. His affection for Efua grew with each passing day, as if he was blinded by her grace and quiet strength. He would often look at her with soft eyes, as if she were a savior sent by the ancestors themselves. "Amma would have loved you, Efua," he said one evening as he watched her prepare dinner. She smiled at him, her eyes twinkling for a moment before returning to the cooking pot. But to Akua, it was all too much too soon. Akua, being the eldest, had always carried the weight of her family's loss on her shoulders. She was old enough to remember her mother, Amma, her gentle voice, her laughter filling the home with warmth, and the way she would tuck them in at night, whispering words of wisdom. Efua, on the other hand, felt like a stranger in their home. She was not cruel, no, but there was something about her that rubbed Akua the wrong way. She never seemed to get too close, never ventured too deep into their conversations, and always avoided direct eye contact. It was as though she held a secret, a story locked away behind her guarded expression. Kofi, the younger brother, was too innocent to notice the quiet tension. He was content to follow his father's lead, praising Afua for everything she did. "Afua is the best cook in the whole village," he'd often say, and Kwame would beam with pride, unaware that his daughter was watching him closely, sensing the subtle changes in their home that no one else seemed to notice. One evening, as the family sat down for dinner, Afua's behavior began to unsettle Akua even more. They were having banku and okro soup, a dish their mother had always made with love. But tonight, as Afua served them, she did not offer her usual warm smile. Her hands, which had always moved with such grace, trembled slightly as she placed the bowl in front of Akua. The young girl noticed the shift immediately. It was not much, just a quick glance down at the table, a hesitation in her movements, but it was enough to make Akua's heart race. That night, Akua lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. She heard Afua moving in the next room, soft footsteps in the darkness, followed by the faint sound of a door creaking open and closing again. Was it her imagination, or had Afua gone out into the yard after midnight, where no one could see her? Akua tossed and turned, her mind racing. Why had Afua suddenly become so distant? Why was she always so careful with her words? It wasn't like the warmth she projected at first. No, it was like something had changed. Something had shifted in the air, and Akua could feel it. The next day, as Kwame and Kofi were out gathering firewood, Akua decided to follow Afua. She had seen the woman slip into the backyard several times in the past week, and each time, Afua had gone to the edge of the village, where no one could see. Akua's suspicion grew, and she quietly slipped behind the house, keeping to the tall grass that bordered the garden. Afua's footsteps were soft, but Akua knew she was heading towards the old shed at the far end of the yard. Akua crouched down low, her breath shallow. She peered around the corner of the shed, only to see Afua standing by a large trunk, her hands fumbling nervously at something inside. Afua looked around cautiously, as if ensuring no one was watching. Akua's heart thudded in her chest. Why was she hiding something in there? What was so important that it needed to be kept a secret from the rest of the family? Before Akua could step forward, Afua glanced over her shoulder, sensing something was wrong. In a flash, she closed the trunk and stood up, her eyes scanning the horizon. Akua quickly ducked behind a bush, barely managing to hold her breath. Afua's eyes lingered in the direction of the shed for a moment, before she turned and walked back to the house, her face unreadable. The moment Afua disappeared into the house, Akua's mind raced. What was it that Afua was hiding? Was it something from her past? Or perhaps something more sinister? Whatever it was, Akua knew one thing for certain. Afua was no longer the woman she appeared to be. There was a darkness in her, a secret that could shatter their family, and Akua was determined to uncover it. As the days passed, Akua's suspicions of Afua deepened. There was no logical explanation for the unease that gnawed at her, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Afua's behavior had grown increasingly erratic. Her smiles seemed forced, her conversations guarded. There was a quiet tension that hung in the air when she was around, like a storm waiting to break. And then there were the strange occurrences that Akua couldn't ignore. It all started one evening when Akua was walking past Afua's room. She had meant to ask her about a missing bowl, but as she reached for the door, she heard voices, low, hurried voices coming from inside. At first, Akua thought it was the wind, but then she heard Afua's voice, sharp and urgent. "Don't call me here. No one can know I'm still in this place," Afua said in a hushed tone. Akua froze, her heart hammering in her chest. The phone line clicked, and the conversation ended abruptly. Akua stood there trying to steady her breath, wondering who Afua had been speaking to. Why had she sounded so frightened? And why was she so desperate to hide the call from the rest of the family? A few days later, Akua began to notice more signs of Efua's mysterious past. While cleaning the house, she came across an old photograph hidden in a drawer. It was a faded picture of Efua with a man and a young child, their faces blurred by time. Efua, in the photo, appeared younger, but the man beside her had a look in his eyes that Akua could not place, a look of suspicion, perhaps even anger. She stared at it for a long time, feeling as though the image was trying to tell her something, but she couldn't make sense of it. The next clue came one afternoon when Akua and Kofi had gone to the village market. They bumped into a woman who had once been a close friend of Ama, their late mother. The woman's name was Adama, and she had always been kind to the children. But today, something in her manner was different. As soon as she laid eyes on Efua, her smile faltered. For a moment, she seemed frozen, as though seeing Efua had stirred something deep inside her. Efua, it's been a long time, Adama said slowly, her voice tight. Efua's face tightened, but she quickly regained her composure. Adama, I didn't expect to see you here. Adama's gaze flickered from Efua to Akua, then back to Efua again. There was an uncomfortable silence before she finally spoke. Yes, a long time indeed, but it's good to see you, Efua. I hope you found peace here. The strange emphasis on the word peace didn't escape Akua. Something about the exchange unsettled her. Adama's words, her cautious tone, the look in her eyes, all pointed to a history that Efua desperately wanted to keep buried. On their walk back home, Akua couldn't shake the feeling that she had uncovered a piece of a larger puzzle. There was something Adama knew, something about Efua's past that she was not sharing. Akua's mind raced, replaying the conversation over and over, trying to connect the dots. What was Efua hiding? That night, after dinner, Akua decided to confront her brother. She found Kofi sitting by the fire, sharpening a knife. Kofi, do you ever feel like something's off with Efua? Akua asked, keeping her voice low. Kofi looked up from his task, a quizzical expression crossing his face. What do you mean? She's just our stepmother. She's been nice to me. I know, but there's something about her, Akua replied. She hesitated, unsure of how much to share. I've been noticing little things, like the way she talks, the people she talks to. I don't think her past is as simple as she says. Kofi furrowed his brow. What do you mean, Akua? You've always been so suspicious. Maybe you're just imagining things. Akua bit her lip. I don't think so. There's something I'm not seeing, Kofi, and I think Efua's hiding it from us. Kofi looked at her for a long moment, as though weighing her words. Then, to her surprise, he nodded slowly. You might be right. I've noticed some strange things too, like sometimes she talks to herself when she thinks no one's around, and when she does, it sounds like she's scared, like she's expecting someone to show up. Akua's heart skipped a beat. This was the first time Kofi had acknowledged anything strange about Efua. Exactly, she said, her voice growing more urgent. Something's wrong, Kofi. We need to find out what it is. The two siblings sat in silence for a while, the crackling of the fire filling the air. Both of them felt the weight of the secret that Efua was so desperately trying to hide. Akua knew they couldn't ignore it any longer, but the more they pieced together the clues, the more the truth seemed to slip through their fingers, like sand in the wind. Efua was a master of disguise, always one step ahead. She had controlled the narrative of her life so carefully that no one could see the cracks in her story, except Akua. And now, with Kofi on her side, Akua knew that they had to dig deeper, no matter how dangerous the truth might be. The discovery came one afternoon when Akua was cleaning the family's storage room. She had grown tired of the weight of the secrets swirling around Efua, so when she found herself alone, she decided to search once again, this time with more determination. The small room was dusty and cluttered, filled with old boxes and forgotten belongings from years past. As she moved a pile of clothes aside, something caught her eye. It was a small wooden box tucked behind an old chest, partially hidden under a stack of yellowed papers. Her heart raced as she approached it. The box was old, its surface scratched and worn, but it looked important. Without thinking, Akua reached for it. The lid creaked as she opened it, revealing a bundle of papers. Letters, photographs, and a small leather-bound journal. Her hands trembled as she sifted through them, but then one photograph caught her eye. It was a picture of Efua, not as the woman she had come to know, but as someone entirely different. In the photo, she was younger, standing next to a man Akua didn't recognize. His features were dark, hardened, and filled with a quiet intensity. They were holding hands, but there was something in their eyes, something far too familiar. Akua's stomach turned. This wasn't the soft, caring stepmother she knew. Flipping through the papers, Akua found a letter, written in a hurried, almost illegible script. Her eyes widened as she read it. Efua, we can't keep running. The people from the village are looking for us. They'll find us if we don't leave. This is the last warning. If you don't leave with me, you're on your own. The words seemed to burn in her hands, each one carrying a weight she hadn't anticipated. Who was this letter from? What had Efua been running from? Her heart thudded as she began to piece together the truth. A truth darker than she could have imagined. Efua wasn't just a quiet woman trying to start anew. She had fled her past, a dangerous past, full of people who were now likely searching for her. Akua's mind raced as she processed the horrifying realization. Efua had left a life of crime behind her, a life filled with shady figures and threats. The woman she had come to see as a mother was, in fact, someone running from her own demons. As Akua sat there in stunned silence, the door creaked open. She quickly shoved the box back into the corner and stood up, her heart pounding. It was Efua. You were looking for something, Akua? Efua's voice was calm, but Akua could hear the strain in it, like a woman trying to hold together a facade that was crumbling. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Akua's mind was reeling. She wanted to shout, to confront Efua with the truth she had just uncovered, but the words caught in her throat. Efua took a step closer, her gaze heavy. I know what you're thinking, Efua said softly, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and something darker. Guilt, perhaps. You've found something, haven't you? Akua nodded, still in shock. Who was that man? What is this letter? What are you hiding from us, Efua? Efua sighed deeply, and for the first time, Akua saw her stepmother's guard break. She sank onto the nearest chair, her face clouded with regret. I never wanted you to know, Akua. I never wanted anyone to know. I wasn't always the person I am now. I had a life before this, before Kwame, before you. A life filled with mistakes, with people who don't forget so easily. That letter, it's from someone I thought I had escaped. But the truth is, you can never truly escape your past. Akua felt a chill run through her. What do you mean? What kind of people are you running from? Efua looked away, unable to meet her eyes. Dangerous people. People who won't stop until they find me. They know what I did. And they won't stop until they get what they want. Her voice broke slightly as she spoke. I was part of something. Something I regret. But I left it all behind, started fresh with Kwame. And I wanted to protect all of you from that darkness. I didn't want you to know what I've done. Akua's head spun as she processed the weight of Efua's confession. Betrayal burned in her chest. All this time, she had thought of Efua as the quiet, kind woman who had taken their father's place in their family. But now she realized that Efua had been living a lie, one that could destroy everything they had built together. When Kwame came home, Akua wasted no time. Her heart was heavy with the need to tell him what she had uncovered. As the family sat down to eat, Akua could barely contain herself. Father, she said, her voice trembling, There's something we need to talk about. Efua. She's hiding something from us. She's not who we thought she was. Kwame looked at her, confused. What are you talking about, Akua? Efua has been nothing but good to us. Akua's voice cracked as she spoke. She's hiding her past, father. She's been running from dangerous people. Efua stood up suddenly, her face ashen. No, Akua, don't say any more. She looked at Kwame with desperation. I never wanted you to know. Please, I did this for you. I did this for all of you. Kwame's eyes narrowed as he looked from Akua to Efua. The confusion in his gaze turned to shock, then anger. Efua, is this true? Efua's silence was enough of an answer. The betrayal hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Akua watched as her father's face fell. His shock turned to a deep, cold anger, and for the first time, he looked at Efua, not as his wife, but as the stranger she had been hiding from them all. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. I couldn't, Efua whispered. I thought I could keep you safe. But now I see. I've only brought danger to your doorstep. The room fell silent, the weight of the truth settling in. The family that had once been so whole was now fractured, its foundation cracked beyond repair. Akua felt a cold wave of fear wash over her as she realized that the life they had known was about to change forever. The silence in the room was deafening. Efua stood there, her back straight, but her eyes full of the pain she had hidden for so long. Her face, once calm and composed, now betrayed the turmoil that had been brewing beneath the surface. Akua had never seen her like this, vulnerable, broken, and stripped of the facade she had worn so carefully for years. Kwame's eyes burned with hurt. He had always seen Efua as the woman who saved him from the void left by his first wife's death. Now, he was staring at the woman who had deceived him, and the realization that he had been living with a lie hit him like a physical blow. Efua, he said, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you trust me enough to share this with me? Efua's lips trembled as she looked at him. She had never been good at lying, but over the years she had perfected the art of evasion. Now the truth hung in the air, and there was no escaping it. I never wanted you to find out, Efua said, her voice low and filled with regret. I thought I could leave it all behind, that I could start fresh with you, with all of you. I wanted to protect this family from my past. I didn't want you to know what I've done, what I've been a part of. Her eyes welled with tears as she continued. I was scared. I thought if I told you the truth, you'd never look at me the same way, that you'd leave me, or worse, that I'd drag all of you into the mess I've made of my life. Kwame's anger faltered, and for a moment, he looked at Efua with pity. He wanted to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay, but something held him back. But you could have trusted me, he whispered. We could have faced it together. You chose to hide it instead, and now I don't know who you really are. Efua closed her eyes, the weight of her guilt pressing down on her. She had lived with this secret for so long that even the idea of confession had been too much to bear. But now that the truth was out, there was no turning back. I was part of a criminal group before I met you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. A dangerous group. They were into smuggling, and I helped them. I got too deep, and when things went wrong, I had to run. I left everything behind, including my daughter. Her voice cracked as she mentioned the child she had abandoned. I thought I could start over, be a good person, but I was never able to outrun my past. Okua stood there, her heart heavy. She had heard the words, but it was hard to make sense of them. How could the woman she had trusted, the one who had taken her mother's place, be capable of such darkness? I never wanted to hurt any of you, Efua continued, her voice breaking. I thought I could protect you from the people who were after me. But I see now that I've hurt you all even more by keeping this secret. I'm sorry. I truly am. I never meant for any of this to happen. Her apology, though heartfelt, only seemed to drive a wedge deeper between them. Aqua felt the betrayal sting in her chest. How could she forgive her? How could she even trust her now, knowing what she had been hiding? Kofi, who had been silent throughout the conversation, spoke up suddenly. "But you didn't tell us, Afua. You didn't trust us enough to share the truth." His voice was quiet but filled with hurt. "How could we trust you now?" The room fell into another heavy silence. The family was at a crossroads, unsure of where to go from here. Kwame ran a hand through his hair, his frustration building. "What do you want us to do, Afua? You want us to just forgive you? To pretend like nothing has changed?" Afua's gaze dropped to the floor. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said softly. "But I need you to understand. I was trying to protect you. I was trying to protect this family from the consequences of my past." Akua shook her head. "You were only protecting yourself, Afua. You didn't trust us enough to be honest with us. You lied to us, and now you want us to forgive you just because you're sorry?" The words cut through the air like a knife. Akua had never felt so conflicted in her life. Part of her wanted to understand Afua, to see the woman behind the lies. But the other part of her, the part that had once loved and trusted Afua, felt utterly betrayed. Kwame stood up, his voice now steady but filled with a cold finality. "I don't know what to think anymore. Everything I thought I knew about you, it's all gone." He turned to Aqua, his eyes filled with regret. "You were right to be suspicious, Aqua. I should have listened to you from the beginning." Akua felt a pang of guilt. She had been so certain, so sure that Afua was hiding something. But now that the truth was out, she realized just how far they had all fallen. Could they ever rebuild the trust they had lost? Could Afua ever truly be part of their family again? Or had she irreparably torn them apart? The tension in the room was thick, each family member dealing with the revelation in their own way. Kofi stood up and walked over to Afua, his expression unreadable. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "But I understand why you did it. I don't know if I can trust you again." Afua nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I understand, Kofi. I'm sorry. I truly am." But the words felt empty now. The damage had been done. The family had been torn apart by the very woman who had once been their foundation. Whether they could rebuild what had been shattered, no one knew. But for now, the only thing certain was that nothing would ever be the same. The days following the revelation were filled with tension, each moment carrying the weight of unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Afua had been trying to give the family space to process, but it was clear that things would never be the same. The house felt quieter, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to break. Akua spent much of her time alone, trying to make sense of everything. At first, she couldn't bring herself to speak to Afua. The betrayal still stung, and her mind raced with questions. How could the woman who had been a mother figure to her keep such a dark secret? Was everything a lie? But as the days passed, Aqua began to question her own reactions. Had Afua truly been trying to protect them? Or was it all just a way to keep her own secrets buried? It wasn't easy, but Aqua started to see that forgiveness wasn't just about excusing Afua's actions. It was about understanding them. Afua had been running from something far bigger than herself, and perhaps in the process, she had lost sight of the family she had come to care for. But Akua wasn't sure if she could forgive her yet. The road to healing, she realized, was long, and it would take time to rebuild what had been broken. Kofi, on the other hand, remained distant. He was hurt by the lies, and he found it difficult to even look at Afua. "How can we move forward when trust is gone?" he often muttered to himself. To him, her past was too big a shadow to escape. He kept to himself, spending his days away from home as much as possible, leaving Aqua to carry the emotional weight of the situation. Kwame, too, was conflicted. His love for Afua had always been the foundation of their family, but now He was questioning everything. How had he been so blind? Had he truly not seen the signs, or had he chosen to ignore them out of a sense of loyalty? Each night, he sat alone, staring into the distance, thinking about the life they had built together. Was it worth saving? Could they overcome this, or was it better to part ways? Despite the hurt, there were moments where Kwame tried to comfort Afua. He saw the deep regret in her eyes, the weight of the secret she had carried for so long. She was, after all, the woman he had once loved, the woman who had made him feel whole again after the loss of his first wife. But with every conversation, every attempt at rebuilding trust, the cracks in their marriage became more apparent. Kwame began to wonder if they could ever truly heal, or if this betrayal would forever define their relationship. Ifua, meanwhile, was struggling to make sense of her own future. She had spent years trying to outrun her past, only to find herself tangled in lies and guilt. The guilt of abandoning her child, the guilt of deceiving Kwame, and the guilt of betraying a family who had given her a second chance. It all weighed on her like a heavy burden. For the first time, she began to question whether redemption was even possible for her. She started spending more time on her own, often walking around the village or sitting in the garden, lost in thought. She had no idea what the future held for her, whether she would be able to rebuild her life, or whether she would remain an outsider in her own family. The truth, once hidden in the shadows, had shattered everything she had worked for, and now she was left to pick up the pieces. But in those quiet moments, Afua began to wonder if there could still be a place for her in the family. Could they ever accept her again? Could she, even after all the damage, find a way to make things right? As the days turned into weeks, the family's wounds began to heal, but it was clear that the scars would remain. The journey of forgiveness, of learning to trust again, would take time. Some members of the family, like Akua, were willing to try to rebuild, while others, like Kofi, remained steadfast in their anger and hurt. For Afua, the future was uncertain, but the one thing she knew was that she couldn't undo the past. All she could do was try to make amends, one step at a time. As the seasons changed, so did the family. What had once been a united, happy household was now a family divided, its bonds frayed but not entirely broken. The truth had been a double-edged sword. It had exposed the darkness of Afua's past, but had also offered the chance for healing and growth. Akua, in particular, had learned the hard way that trust is fragile and that forgiveness is not always as easy as it seems. It was a slow process, and sometimes it felt impossible. But she also understood that holding on to bitterness would only keep her from moving forward. While she wasn't sure if she could ever completely forgive Afua, she had learned to open her heart to the possibility of reconciliation. Kwame too had learned that love and loyalty are not always enough to overcome the weight of deception. The betrayal had shaken him to his core, but it also taught him that he needed to be more aware, more attuned to the people he loved. Relationships required transparency, and secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, could destroy everything. He had to choose whether to stay in the marriage with Afua, or let go of the past and start anew. That decision weighed heavily on him, and the future remained uncertain. For Afua, the lessons were equally profound. She had spent so long running from her past that she hadn't realized how much it had shaped her. But now, with everything exposed, she had to face the consequences of her actions. Whether or not she would find redemption was still unclear, but one thing was certain. She could no longer hide from the truth. It was time to rebuild, not just her relationship with the family, but with herself. In the end, the family learned that life is unpredictable, that trust once broken is difficult to repair, and that sometimes the hardest thing is forgiving someone who has hurt you deeply. But as they moved forward, they understood that healing was a journey, and though the road was long, the possibility of a new beginning still remained. The past may never be fully erased, but the future, with all its challenges and hope, was something they could still shape together.